So when I started to experience this story, I did not expect a lot. I remember also watching Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, and I never got around to watching Fahrenheit. As immersive as they were, I never got the feeling that there was anything that David Cage was really trying to tell me. He's a great cinematic director for cinematic games, but I don't think he's a very good storyteller. So I did not expect a lot, and there's also been a lot of theme in the previous games that I don't totally think are exactly enlightened. As much as I really love a lot of the artistic elements of the previous games, they've been inspiring artistically, I would say, and maybe even thematically. Definitely not in a way that I would say gave me any sense of being told a good story or wrapped up in an experience. And this might partially be my own bias because I don't like branching storylines. I've talked about this to a couple different people, and I have to go into very minute detail to explain why I don't like them, so I'm not going to go into that because it's not really that relevant, but on a basic level, I don't like branching paths because I think it's a storyteller's job to tell a story. A choose-your-own-adventure of any kind. I think the only fun of that is novelty, and I think it makes everything very confusing. And so I've taken a little bit of a look at some of the other paths or the other options and stuff like that, like the bad ones, the machine path for Connor or whatever, the violent path for Markus and Jericho. I haven't taken a look at any other Kara paths because why the hell would I do that? Who wants to just see a little family be miserable? I don't know. That's one that I have not seen a lot of people explore, and I can completely understand why. But anyway, my point is that maybe in those paths, the story is not as well structured, but in this quote-unquote good path, I have to, thinking of that as the main path, which it probably is, let's be serious, I found it to be a really surprisingly well-done, well-structured story. And I know that sounds sort of cold and calculating, but the truth is that a well-structured story is a compelling story, an emotional one. Unlike in Beyond Two Souls and Heavy Rain, this story doesn't throw the player around and confuse us. I think we always know what's going on. We definitely had a first, second, and third act going on, and that's a lot more than I expected initially, but even more than that, the themes of it I thought were actually very, very strong compared to what I expected. If you remember my very first impressions of the game, they were that it was probably not going to be very good. I'm really into AI, and I have pretty high standards for that kind of story, and I did not expect a lot from a David Cage game about human-looking androids. Those aspects together really are a really tricky combo, I would say. But to my pleasant surprise, I think it was great. I think it was really pulled off well, and I guess I'll talk about why. I do think that the three stories of the three main characters really, really work well together, even though they don't interact that much, which I think is really, fascinating. And this is really what impressed me most. I really did not expect a good, solid story from a David Cage game, but I think this one was really just wonderfully done. Obviously, Markus and Connor are on two sides of a conflict, and I wasn't really sure how Kara fit into it at first, I guess, until it became pretty clear that they are the in-between. They are I don't want to say victims. They are the civilians in the short little civil war, and we need that perspective. Connor and Markus as a parallel are great, but I think that without Kara, it's more of just an action game. I think Kara's plot is very necessary, and I think they're really good parallels to each other in terms of especially their deviancy, I guess you'd say, their free will, their opinion of androids and humanity, and where they stand and that sort of thing, because their biggest difference is the different times and ways they make choices, or make the choice to become deviant, I guess, to take responsibility for themselves, because Markus does it right away. He instantly is ready to be a leader, to join the cause, and that makes sense because, he comes from living with Carl, who definitely instilled in him a sense of self-worth. Connor spends the whole game struggling with it, which I think is probably why he's a fan favorite, although, he's also just very cute. That whole taking everything literally thing, that's pretty endearing. But it takes him the entire game going back and forth between letting his emotions drive him and his programming. And Kara doesn't really make a choice until the very, very end, when she realizes that Alice is also an android, and she has to decide if that is important or not. And part of the three parallels, I think, of the three main characters is that Markus is fighting alongside a larger group against a large group. Connor is fighting within himself with Amanda, who turns out to be part of his programming. You know, he's struggling with his own identity. And Kara, her struggle is with Alice, and vice versa. And I do think it is interesting to rewatch it and see how Alice seems to be aware that she's an android and aware that Kara doesn't know that she's an android, and is unsure about what Kara will think when she realizes it. So even though it's unsaid, I really think that the relationship between Alice and Kara was really nuanced. If she had realized that Alice was an android at the beginning of their little adventure, I think the outcome would be a lot different, obviously. But after going through all the stuff, meeting the androids that tried to help her, and Luther, and the Jerrys, and everything, and the people at Rose's house, when she finds out that Alice is an android, now she has a new perspective that she's gathered without knowing that she's gathered it throughout the journey, and that is what allows her to accept Alice and subsequently accept herself. And Luther was really there to, I think, guide her in that. I really thought that Luther was a great addition. He was very necessary for him to give the audience a hint, and for us to see Kara deny the hint, like when he's like hinting that Alice is an android, and we see Kara rejecting the idea, basically. We're really seeing her avoidance of making that choice, and that I think was just really, really smart. Having the audience with Kara completely falling in love with Alice, to the audience getting the information near the end that Alice is an android, and then for Kara to get that just a couple steps later. It's really smart storytelling, I think. A really great way that they trusted the audience to pick up on what was going on. So yeah, I really like Kara's plot. Connor's very interesting because I feel like who he is what is his conflict, but that also means that the audience doesn't quite know, because we know exactly what Markus wants. Markus wants to set the androids free. We know what Kara wants. Kara wants to make sure Alice is safe. And Connor, we don't really know what he wants, and that's not a gripe, that's a very tangible part of his story. I mean, that's kind of his whole story, trying to figure out who he is, you know, him looking for himself, as they say. But that also is kind of confusing, because I don't know if there's really an answer to who is Connor. I mean, for me, there is, because I'm choosing to just believe in the good ending as being the only ending. So this is kind of a step outside of my analysis of what I witnessed. But obviously, as you saw probably over the course of this, I totally fell in love with him. So I definitely have some thoughts about him. It seems to me like the 800 Connor, regular Connor that becomes Deviant at the end, is the quote-unquote, like, the genuine one, since he gets replaced at the end of the bad path. And that's, I think, maybe an implication that it seems like the more true path is the one where Connor becomes Deviant, because otherwise what's the point, right? Since his story is about him making a choice, for him to choose to be a machine doesn't really do anything for the game. It's not really a plot or character growth. It's more like refusal of growth, which is the opposite of what a story is. So I think that Connor becoming Deviant is the more important story of the two needing to be told in the game. But that's also not clear, because obviously this is multiple choice, and if we don't have the machine path, we also don't have the example of the consequences of what would happen if Connor did not settle into his deviancy. I would have liked it if the deviant path had been a little harder, I think. A little less rewarding. I feel like it's very obvious that the machine path is the bad one, because all you get is punishment in that one. And it's, I think, very hard to watch the characters that you care about, you know, hate the character you're playing as, or hate Connor or whatever, or to watch a character you know is capable of empathy to do these terrible things. And at the end he gets, you know, punished for it. Basically, you know, fate is saying, you did the wrong thing, player. You did the wrong thing, because he just gets replaced and is going to be shut down, and he's like, okay, I guess. It doesn't really make sense as its own story. Feels kind of like any, you know, like joining an evil faction. Like, it's there so you can see what would happen, but not as part of the story. And I think that's very confusing, and an example of why I don't really like branching paths, because even though I think it's obvious that the deviant path is the one that we're supposed to connect to, like I mentioned, I can definitely see the appeal and believe in the appeal of seeing characters in completely different situations and the different choices they could make, but I think it can be all told in one story, and if it can't be all told in one story, then it's not the story you want to tell. A part of creating multiple drafts of a story is to refine it until the themes are obvious and it's compelling and there's nothing distracting. If there was one example of something that had to do with branching paths that I had to give a pass to, it would be this, probably. Or, you know, I mean, it would probably be Bandersnatch, because that's what that's about. And that's not really about telling a story at all. That's its own thing, man. You know, basically what I'm saying is, it's not that big a deal. I don't really think it's a problem. It's sort of a minor gripe, I guess, because at the end of the day, we are seeing these characters in different situations, even if they contradict. The characters still have strong characterization, and that is an example of strong storytelling, even if it's done in a way that I don't exactly agree with. Like, no matter what you do with Connor, we know what his personality is, you know? He's Spock, basically. He's serious and literal and naive, I guess. We know that Markus is ambitious and caring and a good leader. We know that Kara has a one-track mind, and we know that she loves Alice no matter what, and that she has a lot of determination and a lot of love to give, no matter what these paths are, and I think that's another example of very strong storytelling and strong character writing. One of the biggest criticisms with this game, and one of the things that made me very wary of it, was the parallels to slavery, civil rights, and other examples of the harsh ways people have been marginalized over human history. So I expected the game to be a little bit more like a pretty strict parallel of that, but to my surprise, I really don't think that's the point. I really think that while the parallels were pretty clumsy and maybe disrespectful, I think they were attempting to use them to tell their fictional story. I don't think they were actually trying to make a point. I saw somebody talking about how the armbands and the little triangle on the androids' uniforms resemble what what Jewish people had to wear in Nazi Germany. But if you look at the making of, you see them talking about it, and they're like, we just really wanted to make sure that they were distinguishable next to a human, so there would be no doubt. And I think that's really funny.
Inspired by everyday utilitarian clothes, I brought a modern touch by adding dynamic display surfaces, the armband we can see on the side, the triangle on the front and back, an LED. Like that, there's no confusion.
Like, most of the people that worked on this are French. I think that any analysis from a strictly American point of view, or looking at it from the point of view of an American author, is missing the point, I guess, a little bit. Because I really don't think that this is about civil rights. I think this is just about androids, and the things they take from history are very clumsy, don't get me wrong. But I think it's just clumsy, not trying to cover a topic that they don't have the right to cover, or that they don't treat with respect, because I don't think they're trying to treat anything with anything. I really think they're just trying to tell their story. And I do think that certain things could have been a lot better, but I don't think it's as harmful, at least in intent, as a lot of people claim. Still, one of the biggest problems that I had with the game was the societal stuff. It so doesn't make sense. I don't know why things were set up the way that they were. Like, the presence of android laws and crossing a border into Canada, we don't know what that means. I mean, we can make some guesses, because we can see how androids are treated, but there is no reason for me to believe that in Canada things would be any different, because the way that androids are treated in America has nothing to do with laws. It's just personal choice. We haven't seen anything having to do with laws. So, on the contrary, I think that in Canada, you would hope that there were android laws to prevent people from abusing androids, right? The lack of android laws doesn't really make sense. It just implies something very, very vague that I really think needed to be explained. It didn't need to be explained in crazy detail, because I know that's not the point, but if I could just understand more what the stakes were, that would be nice, instead of having to just guess. We can make a lot of guesses about what would happen if Kara and Alice stayed, other than, obviously, getting caught up in the revolution, but they were trying to get up before the revolution started. From their story standpoint, we don't really know what would happen if they had stayed. I can definitely understand them hearing this is a safe place and wanting to go and not exploring their options because they're naive, like Zlatko says. and I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also would just have liked to at least have a tangible reason for why they are running and what they are running to. Running away from Detroit and to Canada because one place is bad and the other one is apparently not bad. The absence of bad. Like, I don't know what that means. It's not a major gripe. It's just part of the larger issue I have about societal stuff going on in this. Like, my biggest problem is the lack of human support. I think humans anthropomorphize things, and I think the minute that androids started looking like people, there would already be a lot of human attachment to them, and people treating them poorly, personally, or in a larger sense, like all this, the culling and everything, that people just wouldn't stand for that. Especially in the last bit of the game where they are recalling all the androids, I feel like, man, there is no way that people would just let them go. Just because this handful of androids in Detroit are defective, or deviant, or whatever, we're gonna all give them up randomly, like these presences in our homes, and the ones that run our like factories and stuff. That is just insane. This is a little nitpicky, I guess I would say. I think the lack of human support in a very basic sense, the fact that there are no humans on their side at all, is crazy. Like, all the details of it are like, you know, me just pointing them out, but on the most basic level, the fact that the androids are completely alone in their fight is something that I really can't believe at all. And even if normal people would stand for that, I think that there would have to be so many people, so many, you know, like, bleeding heart types that would already be trying to save them, already be campaigning for them. And if they're not, then I need a reason. If maybe when they first started coming out, CyberLife was like, by the way, they're all not human. Don't treat them as like, there was some amazing marketing campaign that got everybody on board to treat them like property only. Like, I can't imagine what that would be to make the entire world cool with, you know, tossing them out at the first sign of whatever, but it would be something. Also, the money stuff is pretty wild. The economy is good, but unemployment is at an all-time high. People are like buying androids all the time, but they also have no jobs, and someone like as poor as Todd will buy 2 androids, like each, you know, $8,000 instead of fixing up the house. So I can understand maybe that androids are very, very popular household items, but in that case, then people being willing to give them up later is just so crazy still. It doesn't really make sense. I feel like that was done really without any thought, and just done maybe as a way to show how brutal they are toward androids. Calling the places they send them to camps was pretty, maybe the biggest example of what I would say would be like sort of disrespectful imagery. Because androids don't need to go to camps. That doesn't make any sense. They like go to recall centers. I think there's something having to do with that in one of the endings. But they like would go to, you know, giant incinerators, and that would be a pretty gruesome image, but for some reason they decided to use the word camps, which is very weird. But yeah, the public opinion of the androids is super weird. They run all of America's important infrastructures, and they're in everyone's homes, yet they're willing to give them up at the first sign of deviancy in one town, like one city. That's so wild. The only reason I can really see humans being okay with all the abuse that androids get is if there's like some kind of human self-loathing epidemic where everyone, I don't know, they got to this Black Mirror point where everyone was really, really nice to each other and they had all this aggression, and instead of deciding on doing a purge, they just decided to create androids that they could slap around and everyone just agreed not to say anything. Like, I don't know. But humans are so all over the place. I don't think all of them would just let it slide. I think that no matter what, you would still have humans saying don't treat them bad, that there would be humans on their side. The fact that the whole world is against them, I think, is very, very strange. I do think that people being worried about androids showing empathy is very weird. I understand the violent tendencies or even them showing desire to make choices for themselves, but empathy when it comes to like Connor not shooting Chloe or that sort of thing, I think that an android looking at a face that looks like a human face and hesitating to shoot is probably a good thing. I think that the idea that empathy is a negative trait in the beings that live and work among humans is so crazy. So yeah, there's some stuff that just doesn't quite add up. But, you know, technical stuff, I guess. I still think the story was really, really good. But I do think that it could have been told in one story. Even though it's fun to see your choices reflected, and it is a very good way to get the player invested and feel responsible for it. Like, maybe that's the sacrifice. Like, maybe they're sacrificing singular story to make sure the player is as invested as possible. And I can believe that. It's a Quantic Dreams game, so I don't feel like this is really a big missed opportunity. This is definitely what Quantic Dreams likes to do, what they're here for. You know, I think that they would choose player immersion over good storytelling any day, and I think that's actually fine. Like, I don't think Beyond Two Souls or Heavy Rain are bad games, even though I think they have major story flaws, because that is part of what makes Quantic Dreams games. But it's certainly not how I would do it. I like to be told a story. I want to draw my own conclusions of what choices the characters make, because the characters are themselves. I definitely can understand the fun, or the replayability, maybe I should say, of a game that allows the player to make all these very serious choices that turn into branching paths, choose your own adventure. But it's not my thing. And in a the tragic irony, in a parallel universe, this is how I would do it. Personally, I would make... actually, this would have been great as a TV series, but I like the animation stuff, so let's just say that it would still be a game, like a bunch of episodes of a game, like Life is Strange style, because I think that the same stories in all of the plots could be told. I would, like, let's look at it from like a 3-season kind of thing. Like in season 1, you introduce Connor as Hank's partner, and he would be a total machine. 100%. He would piss off everyone in the police office, and he would drive Hank crazy. He would do some like terrible things in the name of his mission, and Hank would just hate him, and they would be at odds. Like at Kamsky's place, he would have shot Chloe in the head, and he would do it completely cold and ruthless. And maybe there would be like little flashes of deviancy that he suppresses during the first season. Maybe like halfway through the first season, Hank, despite not being friends with Connor yet, starts to realize that Connor is, despite his cold attitude and his ruthless choices, is very innocent, and would start to make that connection between him and his son, Cole. Because I think that Hank would absolutely come to care about Connor before Connor makes a good impression. He had a son, and I would like to see him, instead of having to rush this friendship with instant personal connection, or making choices that he instantly approves of, that we would see it more from Hank's perspective for a while, where he would see that Connor was just doing what he was programmed to do, that he is really very new. His first memories are of Emma and Daniel. Like, he's not trying to be an asshole, you know? Like it'd be like, oh, he's, you know, like he would become protective of him despite thinking he's a total douche. Because he is a total douche, but he also is definitely innocent, and I would really like to see Hank look at him that way, begin to notice that halfway through the first season, and then near the end of the first season, he has that, well, he's an asshole, but he's my asshole, and Connor still doesn't really understand companionship or why Hank cares about him, but he'll take it. He probably sees the positive, like he says to Amanda, you know, I think he's adjusting to my presence, but he doesn't really understand. But then in season 2, when decisions got harder and harder for him, Hank would be there for him already. He would already be giving him the benefit of the doubt, I guess. Already be willing to look at things from his perspective as best he can, or at least be there for him, be supportive of him, as, you know, as only a father and detective partner can be, right? There would be sort of a moment at the end of season 1, not like in the finale, but like near the end of, and it might have something to do with the finale, where a little switch is flipped and he realizes that he does have emotions, sort of. And then in season 2, he would be regretting shooting Chloe or something, and he would then be confronted with a similar situation, and like in The Good Path, he would not be able to do it, and not be able to explain why he couldn't. And Hank would, you know, support him like he did. And we would get both of those scenarios. I don't think they need to exist in separate timelines, because it is all things that Connor would do. So in season 2, he would be coming to terms with his deviancy, and at the end of season 2, he and Hank would be like definitely linked to their evolution. And then during season 3, maybe you would introduce the RK900 Connor as like a, you know, his Nega Connor, sent by CyberLife to, I don't know, mess with him or kill him or something, but it would be like a reminder of what he was supposed to be, and it would be I think that could be really creepy and cool. For Markus, at least the first 2/3 of season 1 would be him escaping, his previous life. I think that Carl would still be alive in this case. I don't think that Leo would be dead. I think that's sort of unnecessary. Maybe he'll die later, but some other reason Markus has to leave, and finding Jericho and being like, yeah, I'm myself, and sort of starting to get the androids hyped up to get out there and take responsibility for themselves and start this revolution. And at the end of season 1, they will have made themselves known. They would step into the light and declare their peaceful intent, their very peaceful intent, and what they want. And they definitely would not be able to just touch people on the arms, I don't think, and give them free will. Maybe something a little different, because I just think that's too easy. And they would be peaceful, so they would make their intent clear. And obviously, in this case, I would have it so that there were plenty of human allies, because I really just think that the lack of human allies in the game itself is totally wild. But what I really mean is that at the end of season 1, they would establish themselves as peaceful, and they would be very clear about what they want. So there would be no doubt. There would be no... there would probably still be doubts because people would not necessarily believe them, but they would make it very clear that they weren't Terminators, that they were not... they would do things to prove that they were alive, that they had free will, and that they were peaceful and just wanted rights. They would have a lot of opportunities, I think, to prove that to the public, until there was already talk about how they were, not necessarily politically, but in public opinion, there was at least a very tangible sense of what the androids are here for and what they want, which is peace and equality, right? Season 2, he would be presented with more and more examples of having to make difficult choices that are not so easily met with peace. Like in a situation where do you kill a bunch of humans to save only a few androids? On the one hand, if you kill the humans or shoot them or whatever, losing your peaceful intent. But if you don't save the androids, you're not standing up for the people that you are promising to protect. And if this situation appeared in the game, the answer would be don't kill the humans, let the androids go, because that's the only option. But that's why I say that at the end of season 1 they would be established as their intent is peaceful. So from now on people know that they're just desperate, and that desperation would probably be more what the media was focusing on. They would definitely still be trying to play up they're just effective, blah, blah, blah. That would be a huge part of it, obviously, probably the major part of it. And they would definitely twist the story to make the violence seem unnecessary, etc. But I just would like for there to be at least the public having a moment of understanding what the androids really want, so that the consequences of the decisions made afterwards were not all the result of pure misunderstanding, because it's not very fun conflict, I don't think. I'd like to see more very basic, obvious conflict, like, do we give up this to get this, etc., etc. So maybe in the first third of season 2 is over, Markus has to make a choice that relies on violence, and he's remorseful, but North is there for him because she definitely, they definitely get together in the first season, sort of, or at least have that tension, right? And it would also be about the individual relationships between the four main leaders of Jericho: Simon, Josh, North, and Markus. Not just the relationships to Markus, but to each other. I'd like to see more of North and Josh having the classic peace versus violence argument. Maybe we'd learn who Simon is, because I have no idea who Simon is. Why is Simon here? So yeah, and then in season 3, they would finally have a grasp on what they were doing. I think it's because in season 2 they would still be sort of scrambling, I think, because they are very naive. They are very new to this. They don't really know what they're doing. It's a very small, sort of quick and dirty sort of rebellion. And I think that would persist through season 1 and 2. But then in season 3, they would finally have sort of a system, an understanding at least, of exactly what they're fighting for and exactly how to get what they're fighting for, or at least they see more options, they don't feel as trapped in. Or if they feel more trapped in, they see more ways out. And then season 3 would be them basically securing their larger operation. Like at the end of season 2, Jericho would totally blow up. Because at the end of season 2, Connor has become a deviant, right? Because season 2 is about him struggling with deviancy. It's the same scene as in the game where he goes to shoot Markus, but they track him, and Jericho gets blown up. But ultimately, that's a good thing for the Jericho Collective, or whatever you want to call them, the Android Revolution, because they will set up a base somewhere public. It's not secret. It's a real, it's place it cannot be attacked, because after the attack on Jericho, there's definitely public opinion like is totally like they can't do that anymore. Like no more like the FBI is totally they did bad. They made an oopsie, and now there's like an android. I don't know, like an android neighborhood, like a sealed off android neighborhood or something, and that's where they move to, and that's where they work, real buildings, that sort of thing. And so they have that all established, and they have season 3 to build it and make it a real formidable force. Probably have decided what their name is other than just the androids of Detroit or Jericho the movie, I don't know, whatever. Jericho, country music sensation. And from then on, obviously things would just get bigger, like season 4, etc. Kara and Alice is a little bit trickier because I can think of a lot of ways that they would go, but I also like the idea of them staying in Detroit because that's where everything takes place and that's half the fun, right? I love Detroit. But I guess the way that I would do it for them is I would have it be very similar. I would have them escaping Todd instantly, basically, the same way as in the game. I don't think that needs to be established any more than it already is. So we would understand that Todd was, an abusive father, that the mother was gone. We'd see those papers and everything, and we'd know that Kara got broke. And then the first season would be them just trying to get out of Detroit, I think. So it would be them basically just trying to avoid the police. There would be longer sequences of Kara pretending to be human and trying to get stuff done. We would still not know that Alice was an android. All of season 1, we would still believe that she was human. Season 2, when the android revolution really starts, is when they finally get out of Detroit and go live with Rose, basically. They're there for a while. They have some ventures in trying to hide from the police, and they help Rose help other androids, right? Alice, I think Rose would know that she was an android, but she would just treat her like a human because that's what she does in the game. If Rose realizes that Kara thinks that she's a human, she's just like, she just keeps it to herself, basically. I think that, like, at the end of season 1, that's, when we would have Luther with us, because, like, 2/3 of the way into season 1, we'd, meet Zlatko and have that crazy House of Horrors, because that was pretty cool. So, as they are leaving Detroit on the way to Rose's house, the same way when they're, with the Jerrys, that's when Luther is at first like, by the way, Alice might be not human, and Kara's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. So the audience would sort of know at that point, and then we would get confirmation in season 2 when maybe like 1/3 of the way into season 2, Rose realizes that Kara doesn't know that Alice is a android, and she like confronts Luther about it and is like, what is wrong with Kara? Why does she not understand? And Luther's like, just let her figure out in her own time. She, Alice acts like a human. Let's just let her be that way for a while. And then I think that it would be at Rose's house where Kara does realize that Alice is an android, not down the line when the climax happens. Like, I think the Jerrys would come, or Jerry would come and work on, the farm or whatever with them, and they would have, like, just this little, this little family, and that family would be what really secures Kara's belief in androids and therefore herself. So when she does finally realize that Alice is an android, she doesn't really need to see the revolution going on. It's just the people in her life, the other androids in her life that show her that being an android is not lesser. And the androids that come and go from Rose's place. I can see definitely a scene of Kara sitting on like the back porch looking contemplative and devastated after realizing that Alice is an android, and having Luther come out and give her the same talk. And maybe Alice listens from the window, that kind of thing. She knew what was going on in the game. And yeah, so then in season 3, I think they would... I don't think Kara would ever want to put Alice in danger, but I would really like to see the main 3 interact. So in the middle of season 2, at least, I would really, really like to see somehow Kara, maybe with Luther but not Alice, because Alice is just asleep safe in Rose's house, interact with Markus or Connor, or both, either. Kara and Luther are probably one of the major examples of Connor showing empathy when he does not capture them, even though Kara is on the wanted list. And I'm sure he could tell Amanda, but that guy Luther was huge, and Amanda would be like, whatever you're saying, Connor. But from that point, he would learn something about them, like something that they know, and then at the end of season 2, when he joins the cause, however he does that, because they still need to be detectives, right? I don't know how they would balance that, but then Kara is also a resource and becomes friends with Connor and Markus, and or Markus is part of a plot that they're involved in or something. Either way, they meet each other. I just really want the three of them to become weird friends. Who doesn't, right? Our deviant trio. And yeah, the series would just go from there. So that is what I would do. The reason I paint this picture is because I think there is a way to tell the same stories without having to have these branching paths. And also because I was thinking, how would I want to do this? Like, because I do like the other themes presented. I don't like that they're in separate stories, meaning we have to separate them in our mind. I think that's maybe my biggest problem with branching storylines, is because we're forced to then separate them. Even though they're the same characters and the same themes and stuff, we can't accept it as a whole. And I think that's a big detriment to storytelling, I guess. But overall, again, I'd like to say, even though I just gave a whole, idea of how things would be different, it's not that different. It's just a different structure, because I still think that the stories told and the themes presented and the way that they are presented is pretty great. Like, I really did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did. And I was really just very pleasantly surprised with what I saw. And yeah, so this was a great experience for me. If you made it to the end of this, you are a saint. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's my whole commentary, my whole analysis. TLDR, I think it was really, really good. There's a few things I would do differently, but not much. And that's a lot more than I was expecting. So good job, David Cage. Good job, everyone working on this. And I don't know why I said that. I don't know if anybody would ever see this. But thanks to GAZarts again for uploading the gameplay. And thanks to you for watching and listening. Guess I'll see you later on another series, another video. Soon enough. Alright, bye.